This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, www.reevesfirm.com.
In the know.
Good evening, everyone.
In the know. Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? Is this a reality we simply have to accept? Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Good day, and welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I wanted to take a slightly different approach because some of you may have heard, or some of you may not have heard, that there's been a new Social Security ruling that just came out, which is called 16-3, if I remember correctly, which has to deal with credibility determinations. And then I noticed on a couple of places where people were like, oh, well, what is that about? And then I stopped and I said, you know what? This is going to sound silly. Before I even go into what that is specifically, I think a lot of people don't fully understand the scope of what most representatives are looking at in terms of the laws, rules, and regulations when they're trying to assist somebody in trying to determine if they're disabled. And I wanted to do kind of an overview of all those different things and then kind of explain to you how we make them interplay with each other. For our purposes, and if I'm looking off to the side and you think I'm hooked on phonics here, it's because I have on my other screen, you can probably see it reflecting off my glasses, I have my screen split. So I have, of course, camera in front of me, and then I have the different things that I'm going to be talking about here today. The law and Social Security. First of all, of course, you know, in order for us to have the basis in the law, you have to have a federal statute that's passed, or what we call the United States Code. That basically writes out the law. That's, you know, once a bill has been written into a law, it's usually codified. That's the word we call it. Once the law is written, once something is written into law, it's codified into a code. And these codes are what we call federal statutes. You find these at all different levels of government, whether it be federal, state, county, city, municipality, and so forth like that. And these statutes governs pretty much everything in terms of what we do for our Social Security practice. Now, those statutes are great, but in order for us to utilize them, they're typically put in more definitive form, which is what we call regulations or the Code of Regulations. And these are the official regulations that Social Security utilizes. They're just Code of Federal Regulations. There's a lot of for different agencies. Basically, the Code of Federal Regulations is utilized for almost every regulatory body. So when you're looking at an organization, whether it be the EEOC, whether it be OSHA, the Mine Safety Health Administration, any type of federal agency, immigration, are governed by a set of specific regulations, and these are called the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, the other thing that we have, so we've got U.S. codes, Code of Federal Regulations, we have Social Security rulings. Now, Social Security rulings are, and if you go on www.ssa.gov, it'll say this, series of presidential standards to be used in subsequent similar cases, decisions relating to programs administered by the Social Security administrations. And these rulings can be based on case decisions made at all levels, whether it be federal court, commission of decisions, opinions, things of that nature. Now, you're probably sitting there going, huh? Just follow along with me, okay? So what happens is Social Security, these rulings are based on decisions that have been made at different levels. That basically could be used throughout. There's the HALAX. The HALAX is the Hearings, Appeals, and Litigations Law Manual. This is the procedural guidelines that is utilized for how cases are to be processed at the hearing level and the appeals council level. Then you have the Programs Operation Manual, which is the primary source of information used by the Social Security employees to process claims for Social Security benefits. And then you have what we call case law, where these are cases where once you get out of the Social Security Administration, you're actually having to sue the Social Security Administration in federal court. These decisions interprets basically whether or not the agency followed the law in accordance with their own internal regulations and following the federal statutes and things of that nature. Now, let's go to the bigger question. What the hell does this all mean? All right. Because when people come to me sometimes and they're asking, you know, Attorney Reeves, I look online, I can figure this stuff out. I say, here's the problem that most people don't fully understand, is that all of these things have some measure of interplay with each other. So what happens is that when you have a representative, they're mindful of certain things. So when they're reviewing your file, they're taking in consideration specific Social Security rulings. You know, if there's particular, like I'll give you a good example. There's actually a specific ruling that deals with obesity. And it actually gives guidance to the Social Security Administration on how to take in consideration the impact that obesity has on your impairments. Meaning, if you have certain impairments, it may be assumed that obesity, if you're a certain level of obesity, it may cause your situation to be worse. As opposed to allowing Social Security representatives to kind of have to figure it out, it gives definitive guidance as to what types of things they can utilize as a tool to assist them to determine whether or not that obesity impacts your condition. I hope that makes a little bit more sense. Now, the rulings don't tell you if you do this, you must do that. That's not what it's designed to do. It's basically designed to give guidance. Okay, HALEX is the same way. The HALEX is really the procedural guidelines it talks about, tells basically judges and the Office of Disability Adjudication and Review, which is the hearing level, what they should specifically do if they're put into a various unique situations. The POMS you see utilized more so at the local office level, even though it applies to the entire level. But those are the actual primary source of information for how you're actually supposed to do things within the organization. Now, and the reason why I say they all have a unique interplay within each other is because, for instance, when you go to the HALEX and when you go to the rulings and you look in the rulings in the HALEX and even the POMS, they have specific references to the Code of Federal Regulations by which they're relying upon to make these determinations or give these specific procedural guidelines. Let me say that again. When you go to the POMS or the HALEX or the Social Security rulings, if you look in there, almost all of them specifically relate to specific regulations that are utilized in order to give that guidance. And it's usually more than just one. Okay, it's usually like 4 or 5, depending on what it is and so forth. Because what it does is these particular things will specifically let you know how those particular regulations have an interplay with each other. Now, I'm going to be blunt when I say this. When you go into a hearing, this is for my people. First of all, you don't always tell people, you don't have to have a representative. You don't. You can go by yourself if you feel comfortable enough to do so. Understand how this interplay works. Because if you don't understand, then what ends up happening is you may put yourself in a position where you may not know what to do in order to set your case up in such a way to ensure that you protected yourself because you've covered those things. Now, you're probably saying, what the hell do you mean, Attorney Reeves? What I'm saying is this. When you're going into your hearing, there's 2 things that you need to be mindful of. And this is, I'm talking about even during the course of the Social Security process. Let me back this up. Remember, I say this every video, not every video, but a lot of videos. You bear the burden of proving you're disabled. You bear the burden of proving you're disabled. So it is important that you understand the interplay amongst these different things. Why? So that you can do what you need to do to prove your case along the way. And then secondly, and more importantly, if you go before a judge, you want to be able to have everything put in its particular place. You want to have everything that you need put in a particular manner so that if you believe that the government has not complied with their own internal requirements of the rulings, the HALEX, or the POMS, whatever the case may be, you want to be able to adequately show in your case how they have not done what they're supposed to do. But if you don't have a good enough knowledge or grasp of how all these things interplay, then you're going to have a tough time. That's the other part where the case law becomes very important, because the case law a lot of times will let you know, and this is where people, I always tell people, you got to be mindful. As you go up the food chain, how things are applied at each level is different. For instance, when you apply at a local office level, they should all handle it a certain way. But as you get up to the hearing level, every judge's jurisdiction handles cases utilizing all these things, but they may handle things a little differently. Same thing. Once you start going into suing the Social Security Administration, depending on where you're at, the federal court circuit in that area they may have a body of decisions of how they've interpreted how the Social Security Administration has handled certain things in a particular way. If you don't know what that is, then you're not going to know how to adequately prepare for that, if that makes sense. Let me say it once more. If you're not as versed on all these different areas and how they interplay with each other, you won't have a true appreciation of how to adequately prepare your case so that if you have to continue beyond the judge's level and you want to keep fighting, that you've done everything necessary in order to keep your case at a particular level so that this way you can make sure you have everything you need on appeal. I know this is one of my longer videos, so please forgive me, but I wanted to make sure people fully understand that, just merely looking at online and, and doing a little research in Google and so forth like that, if you don't have a full understanding of how all these things interplay, like I said, there's countless people who've gotten disability benefits without knowing this, but just know, if you're not sure how all these things interplay with each other, you may not be in the position of presenting the case in the manner that you want to be able to prove that you're disabled. Remember, it's a long process. You want to do whatever you can to put yourself in the best position possible. So make sure that if you don't have an understanding of how these things interact with each other, that you get someone who does.